Hi, my name's Catherine Conway, and I'm the reuse lead at GoUnpackaged. We're a consultancy in the UK working with lots of the big supermarkets and brands to help transition them away from single-use packaging to reusable packaging. Today, I want to talk to you about the problem of packaging and how we might solve it by moving from single-use to reuse. So you'll recognize this from your weekly shopping when you go to the supermarket. Everything that we buy comes in packaging, and quite often that packaging is actually based in plastic, usually single-use plastic. So whilst plastic packaging is a really good material, it's very cheap, it's very light, it's very resource efficient, so it is a really good material to get products safely to you. The problem is that we don't often think about the end of life and what we're going to do with this plastic packaging once we've used it. So what we end up with is a huge amount of waste, a lot of it coming from single-use plastics. So global plastic waste is estimated to triple by 2060, with the majority of that coming from short-lived items, i.e. packaging, something that you use very quickly and then you throw away. And what we know is that the UK and US, we are the producers of the most plastic waste out of any country in the world. So we are producing a huge amount of plastic waste per person per year that we need to try and do something with. So to try and understand really how many pieces of packaging this is, there's something called the Big Plastic Count, which Greenpeace and Everyday Plastic do every year, and you can get your school to take part. And this year, they estimate that we as households are throwing away 1.7 billion pieces of plastic every week. Now, that's 90 billion pieces per year. And what we're about to find out is very little of that is actually being recycled to be able to turn back into more plastic packaging. So the question is what happens to our waste? Well, of the waste that we're creating, 32% of it leaks. So that goes into the sea. We've all seen the problem of plastics in the oceans. It goes into land. You've seen the problem with litter on your streets. 40% of it is landfilled, which means we're just burying it in the ground, which is a problem that people will have to solve in the future, and also just a huge waste of those resources. 14% of it is being used for what's called energy recovery. That's really incineration. So what we're doing is we're burning it, and then we're using the electricity, the heat that comes off it to produce electricity. And of that, only 14% of it's collected for recycling. Now, of your 14%, about 4% gets lost in the process. That's just what happens in industrial processes. 8% is used for cascaded recycling, which means, for example, a plastic bottle might become a plastic bucket, which might become a piece of street furniture. So every time that gets reduced, it's a less good piece of plastic. And of this, only 2% of the waste that you're throwing away is actually used for closed loop recycling. So that's when a bottle becomes a bottle. So this is a huge problem for the environment, but also it's a huge problem of human health as well and human well-being. So if you look across these sustainable development goals, which I'm sure you're all learning about, packaging actually sits across a huge amount. So it sits across our health and well-being, our clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, because we have a huge problem with the people that have to work on recycling and rubbish tips. Industry, so obviously the waste industry is huge. Sustainable communities and cities. How do we all live together without creating this huge amounts of waste? So it goes on and on. So this really is a problem that we need to solve, and we need to solve it quickly. So you might ask, well, what's the government doing about this? So I just wanted to share this with you. So there's something called the 25-year Environment Plan and the Waste and Resources Strategy. But you'll find that the language is full of very kind of woolly language. So we are working towards targets of zero avoidable waste by 2050. We are eliminating avoidable plastic waste by the end of 2042. And then you know what politicians are like. They all argue over what that terminology means. So it means we're not really reducing anything. The Environment Act is helpful. So the Environment Act was brought in 2021. And what it's doing is creating something called a polluter pays framework. So that means if you are a company that is creating packaging that then becomes waste that costs us as citizens money to take care of, then you need to take responsibility of that financially. So the way they're doing that is there are charges for single-use plastics. There is something called extended producer responsibility. So that's when companies are made to deal with the waste that they produce. And the government is looking at a deposit return scheme. So from 2027, when you buy a bottle of pop or a bottle of soft drinks to drink after school or something, then you will be expected to put that back into a machine where it can be taken and turned into another bottle. So there is some legislation. But if you compare that to what Greenpeace and the other campaigning NGOs are asking for, is they're saying we need targets to cut single-use plastics by 50% by 2025, which is next year, and at least 25% of this should be met by reusable packaging. So that's what I'm going to come on to now, is talking to you about how we're going to solve some of these problems. So we're calling this zero waste. So zero waste is really part of the circular economy, and it's how we move from how we've always produced things to how we need to do things in the future for a planet that's made of finite resources. So we have what's called a linear economy. So linear meaning a line, which means we just produce things, we use them, and then we throw them away as rubbish. Then we're doing okay with it, the recycling economy. So that's us putting things in the recycling. So that means, as I said, it's that cascaded recycling. We get to use things for a few times, but then it still gets thrown away at the end, or landfilled or incinerated. What we need is a circular economy. So that's where we design something to be reusable, and we reuse it again and again and again and again. And that baked into the design from the start. So we all, in my industry, we all work towards something called the waste hierarchy. So you've got to think about the things you most want to do are at the top and the things you least want to do are at the bottom. So the first one is prevent. How do we stop things? So how do we redesign things? So that might be redesigning packaging so it's got little bits of plastic, less tabs, less labels. You might have seen some soft drinks bottles are starting to have the cap with a tether onto the bottle. So that means that the caps don't go missing and start polluting the environment. The next one is, how do we reduce? How do we just have less of it? And then we get to what I'm really going to talk about today, which is reuse. How do we design for reuse? Only after that should you be thinking about recycling, recovery, or disposal at the end. But really, we want to focus on reuse. So we are looking at something called a circular economy for packaging. And this has all been developed by a brilliant organization called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as a new piece of terminology in our industry. And now everybody works to this. So what these are different types of reuse models. And I'm going to talk you through them and give you an explanation of which each one is. So on the left-hand side, you can see there are refill options, and on the right-hand side, you can see there are return options. So the refill options are where you as a consumer own something and you refill it yourself. So you might get a product in a pouch, and then you might have a nice glass bottle at home that you fill it into. So that's quite often for things like laundry detergents, cleaning products at home. Then you've got refill on the go. So that's where you as a person, as a consumer, go down to a shop and you take your own container and you use some sort of dispenser to fill up the product. So you've probably seen those in zero waste shops where you might go and take your container and fill it up with cereals or rice or something like that. Then on the return side, this is a slightly different way of looking at it. So this is, imagine normal consumer pots like you might see, but they come pre-filled. So imagine you get your jar of pasta with the pasta pre-filled, and you're effectively borrowing that jar from the company, and then you send that back with your home delivery. Or like return on the go, you might get something in a reusable cup. So say you're at a festival or an event or a stadium, and you might get a drink in a reusable cup. And so you use your drink, you drink it, and then you take it back and you give them the cup back and they reuse it. So really, this is a very new part of the packaging industry. And lots of companies and designers are working on new ideas for new types of packaging that might fit into these different models. So how this has happened in the last, well, I've been doing this for 17 years, and how this has happened over nearly 2 decades is we've seen a huge rise of independent zero waste stores. So these are small shops, small independent shops on your high street where people sell things from bulk. So they might do it on a market stall, they might sell dry goods, they might sell cleaning products, toiletries, and you as a consumer bring your own container down to fill those up. The thing we really need is all of these brands to start doing it. So some of the supermarkets in the UK have started doing trials. We've worked on a lot of the trials with them. But what we really need is a huge move by big brands, big retailers, to start offering you reusable options and refillable options to wherever you go. So some of these supermarket trials, which I can show you, is on the left, you can see Waitrose. On the right-hand side, you can see Marks and Spencer's. They're very similar to the zero waste shop. So it's absolutely brilliant that these retailers have been doing this, because it's really important to get these solutions out in front of customers so people can start engaging with them. But the problem is that the supermarkets run them in the same way that we all used to with our little zero waste stores. So there's lots of cleaning and there's lots of filling and there's lots of bulk packaging out the back. So it's not really what we would call a scalable solution. So a scalable solution is something that can really be scaled up, that you could imagine every branch of Tesco doing, or every Unilever product, or every Nestle or Coca-Cola product coming in reusable packaging. So what we've been working on at GoUnpackaged, we're a consultancy, we work with big businesses to try and help them come up with solutions, is this new idea of system change. So what we've done is we have taken the original hoppers, the dispensers that you've just seen in those other supermarket trials, and we've redesigned them. So we've actually got what we call a vessel. So the back end of the system becomes a bit like, I'm going to use an example of a beer keg. So that's when you go with your parents to the pub, then all the beer in the taps comes out of a beer keg system that all of the different companies use. So really, we've taken that idea and we've brought it into the supermarket context. And you'll see in this video, the manufacturers put their products, so that could be rice, it could be pasta, cereals, muesli, anything. They put that straight into the vessel when they're packing their goods, in the same way they pack single-use packaging. They send that out through the supply chain. It comes to the store. It's sold from in the store with customers bringing their own containers. And then it goes back through the supply chain. Somebody else industrially cleans it, sends it back to the supplier. So the reason I wanted to show you this video and this system that we've been working on is because I want you to think of system-wide solutions. If we're going to really be able to tackle the 1.7 billion items of packaging sold every week, then we need systems that all of the different supermarkets can use, all of the different brands can use. Something else that I wanted to show you today is the idea that we might have citywide solutions as well. So this is the example from our house in Denmark, who have created a whole reuse network within their city. So if you see on the left, that's a whole reuse centre. So similar to when you go to the tip or the recycling centre, this is actually a reuse centre. So people can give away things that are still fine to use. So maybe old mobile phones, garden equipment, kitchen equipment, clothes, anything you like. Anything can be reused, and then citizens of the city can come and take those away and reuse them instead of buying new ones, which obviously uses a lot more resources. Additionally, they've got these really brilliant reusable cup schemes. So this is every cafe that you will go to in our house in Denmark will give you your drink in a reusable cup. And then they have what are called reverse vending machines in the street. So you pop your cup back in and you get your deposit monies back. And the reason I wanted to show you this today is because whilst we need solutions that the supermarkets and the brands can all work together, we actually need to think of citywide solutions. So how might we be able to get restaurants to work together? How do we get them to work with the local council, the local recycling services? So really the future that we need to get to, which your generation is coming up into and will be, part of the workforce, thinking of these ideas, working for companies that can come up with these ideas, is how do we create solutions that are really, really scalable and standardized and can be used by any company in whichever sector you're working in. So I guess I just wanted to end in what can you do? I think it's really easy to feel that there's nothing that we can do, that all of these problems are too big, there's too much packaging, but actually there's loads of things you can do. So starting with you and in your own families, you can make good decisions. So you can decide to always take your cups with you, always take your reusable bottles with you. You can make different choices when you go to the supermarket in terms of what you buy. You can go and visit your local zero waste store, very easy to find online, and you can take your own packaging down to fill up. And then thinking a bit more widely, what might you be able to do in your school or your college? Can you speak to the catering department to ask them to stop using single use? Can you find out what's being sold in the vending machines and try and make different product choices and things like that? So there's lots and lots of things that you can do in your everyday life to try and help solve this problem.